The Nigel Farage Show.
Good morning, everybody. The weather continues to be amazing. We're through to the semi-finals of the World Cup. National pride, self-confidence is back. What could be better? Particularly for somebody like me, who's always been a self-proclaimed patriot, and I believed that's why I supported Brexit. So is it happy, lovely, sunny Sunday morning for me and for 17.4 million people? Well, I don't think so. Now, last Friday, the Cabinet were there in Chequers. Their mobile phones were taken away. There were no government cars for them. They were told that if they resigned, they'd have to walk a mile up the drive and hail a cab or rig a cab. And no one did resign. And peace and unity and love broke out. In fact, everybody agrees on everything. The newspapers this morning are full of joint articles from people who back Remain and back Leave during the referendum. And here was Mrs May on Friday evening speaking at Chequers.
Well, in detailed discussions today, the Cabinet has agreed our collective position on the future of our negotiations with the EU. And our proposal will create a UK-EU free trade area, which establishes a common rulebook on industrial goods and agricultural products. This will maintain high standards, but we will ensure that no changes can take place without the approval of our Parliament. As a result, we will avoid friction in trade. That will protect jobs and livelihoods and also meet our commitment to Northern Ireland. We've also agreed a new business-friendly customs model with freedom to strike trade deals around the world. And now we want to get on at pace, negotiating this with the EU to bring prosperity and security to people.
And she kept on saying on Friday, as she's been saying ever since she became Prime Minister, we are taking back control of our laws, borders and money. Hooray, say the Brexiteers. Isn't this wonderful? And she puts out a 12-point plan telling us that it's all going swimmingly. I wonder whether we really are taking back control of our laws, borders and money. Well, to help me through this is Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor. Good morning, Theo.
Very good morning, Nigel.
So, in some ways, and I did rather predict this last Sunday, Mrs May had all the cards and all the dark mutterings and threats of Eurosceptics resigning. I predicted nobody would resign, as indeed is the case. There appears to be, Theo, genuine cabinet unity.
Almost. Well, we understand from this morning's newspapers, the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson stood up against Mrs May in that Chequers summit. He described the plans put forward by the Prime Minister. Well, I can't be too rude.
No, I know.
It begins with T and ends in
yeah.
D. And he said there were some very good polishers in the room. He wasn't very impressed. But since then, of course, he has bitten his tongue because Prime Minister Theresa May said that collective responsibility had been restored and there would be no more dissent.
But isn't the point
tolerated.
here, Theo, isn't the point here that we get a report on the front page of the Mail on Sunday that Boris Johnson was very upset, he used bad language, said this deal was absolutely awful, and then he agreed to it?
Exactly, and that was why Andrew Bridgen, from an arch Eurosceptic on the back bench, his MP up in Leicestershire, described him more of being a Neville Chamberlain than a Winston Churchill. And of course, Boris privately thinks that he's just like the former Prime Minister who won World War II, and that's why Andrew Bridgen has made this criticism. But others, like Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker, Eurosceptic as well, has come out and said that he's content with the deal. He's happy, and there's a split, isn't there, between the hardcore members of the European Research Group, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Mr. Evans and Andrew Percy, those Eurosceptics who are prepared to say, look, let's get on with it. We have to put up with this and go forward.
Mind you, knowing Boris, of course, he could change his mind totally by Tuesday, couldn't he?
He could, but he does like being Foreign Secretary, and I think there's also a real...
of course. Of course. Title, position, ministerial car, status. These things are terribly important. But let's examine, Theo, let's just examine this continual phrase that we're taking back control of our laws, our borders, and our money. Now, it seems to me that when we say we're taking back control of our laws, when in the same sentence she talks about common rules, within the single market for goods. That means we go on being a law taker.
On goods, yes, and that's to get round the problems posed by the customs union and manufacturers in this country who need to be able to sign up to European regulations in order to get their goods through customs without any checks that might delay their manufacturing process. That's the argument that's put forward by the likes of the CBI and so forth. So we are signing up to that common rule, and we're also signing up, although the document, the 12-point plan, says that we're no longer going to be within the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. There is going to be an arbiter to make sure that we don't contravene the European Court of Justice. We're going to respect the European Court of Justice, but we're not. The plan says, the 12-point plan from Theresa May says, going to be within the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. And
what we're doing here, I mean, I remember one of her pieces of legislation called the Great Repeal Bill. But the reality here is we are accepting 45 years of EU laws will be maintained without a single change.
Yes, and that's the argument. And the other one the Prime Minister's putting forward in that plan, Nigel, and this is where I think there's going to be significant pushback from Michel Barnier and the European Union, is there's going to be a parliamentary lock, we're told, under these plans on new rules and regulations coming from the European Union. It's very difficult, I think, if the European Union is going to be introducing new rules and regulations that might well affect, I don't know, safety standards on windscreens or tire, tread on cars, whatever it might be. If there are going to be new rules and regulations, we're not going to be able to remain part of that common trade area if we're not prepared to accept those new rules and regulations.
So new rules, court judgments. But there's a piece of good news, of course, because the Prime Minister keeps telling us we're taking back control of our borders, are we?
Well, the document that was published on Friday evening talked about labour mobility. So basically, what they're saying is there will not be free movement of people; there'll just be free movement of workers. Yes, exactly. So they're going to be able to put controls. If you don't come here without a job, then you won't be able to come to the United Kingdom. If you have a job, then this is the presumption, because it's actually quite a loose phrase, Nigel, and they haven't tied down the detail. But if you've got a job with a UK employer and you're from the European Union, you would be able to come to the United Kingdom.
Well, the Eurosceptic rebellion, as it was supposed to be, has amounted to absolutely nothing. In fact, Mr. Gove and others are out there saying what a wonderful deal this is. There are some unhappy backbenchers. Is there going to be a threat to her position during the course of this week? I've lost him. Well, I did ask that question. I don't think there will be. I think politically, Theresa May finds herself in a relatively strong position within her own party. But is she in a strong position in the country? Well, I have to tell you, my view is that she is not. I think there are millions of Conservative voters who will either vote for somebody else or simply not ever bother to vote again, because what has been offered here is nothing less than a sellout. A sellout on all of it. How can she say to people, we're taking back control of our laws, our borders, our money, when clearly we're not? Ben from Bristol, good morning.
Oh, hi, Nigel. We're together again.
Hi. Well, there you go. So, Mrs. May's deal, is this what 17.4 million people voted for?
It might not be exactly what they voted for, but it's not so far off that it.
Really?
Yeah, I think. Look, you got to put yourself in Theresa May's position. Okay, she's handling all these negotiations. Come on, Nigel, can't say.
No, Ben, I can't. I wasn't a Remainer, so I can't put myself in her position.
I understand, Nigel. You put a lot. You're passionate about these things. And look, I believe in Brexit. I think it's right for the country. But as far as I can see, I'm coming from a different angle. I voted for the Brexit. I didn't see myself majorly getting sold at. It seems to be delivering the main bullet points that people wanted. The closing of the borders, the sort of autonomy of our legal and political system.
No.
There might be a couple of loose frayed edges here and there. But bear in mind, Theresa May is trying to protect some of the interests of the businesses and things like that. I don't think she's trying to sell anybody out, Nigel. I mean, people like Michael Gove, I don't know, what are you inferring there, that they've been bought out?
I'll tell you what I'm saying.
I mean, they're intelligent guys. I mean,
I'll tell you what I'm saying, Ben. I'm saying that people like Boris Johnson and Michael Gove have decided they will put party before country, career before principle, the maintenance of a Conservative Party sense of unity ahead of what 17.4 million people voted for. That's what I'm saying.
Well, look, I just think it's just not. You were never going to get perfection. You weren't going to get this perfect deal. People like you are really important because you see the ideals, you see what needed to be done, and you're very passionate. And you know, when this Brexit comes through, which it will come through, in about 10 or 15 years' time, when it is proven to be a good result, I think there'll be a major speed wobble with all the trade and everything for a few years. You will be remembered very positively and very fondly in this nation, Nigel.
Well, that's,
and also,
that's kind of you, Ben. But why are we paying £39 billion as an exit fee to maintain with goods tariff-free access for German motor cars and European industry who have an £80 billion surplus with us every single year? How does that make sense? And then to be tied, Monsieur Barnier will demand a treaty guaranteeing that we adhere to all new rules. How's that a good deal?
It's not perfect, but it's not so terrible that it ruins the whole idea of Brexit. It was always going to be a bit difficult. And just bear in mind one thing, Nigel. When they put that statue up of you, remember these words from this guy. Record what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Yeah, because I had an epiphany last week. England are not going to just get into the final. They're actually going to win this World Cup. And I don't know, just remember that, record it, and you can play it in 2 weeks' time when what I've
Brilliant, Ben. Great call, thank you. Well, Ben from Bristol is telling us that football's coming home. But is Brexit coming home? Not with this deal that Mrs May has agreed with her cabinet. And that's even before Monsieur Barnier says no. We want even more concessions. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's now 10:16. We are taking back control of our laws, borders and money, says the Prime Minister, even after the deal that was agreed with her cabinet at Chequers, and of course before Monsieur Barnier makes us make yet more concessions, which undoubtedly is what he will try to do, and we of course will say yes and keep on making concessions. I do accept one thing, which is the government are trying to make sure that we leave the Treaty of Rome and all of its subsequent amendments, and we leave the European Union at 11 p.m. on March the 29th. But if they sign us up to a new treaty binding us in to the European Union's laws and legal framework and the continued free movement of workers, have we really left? Would it just be Brexit in name only? And would that be a betrayal, not just of the people that voted for Brexit, but of everything this Prime Minister has said, including her general election manifesto? And I have to say, I do think that this is a total sellout. It comes from a leader who is weak, a leader who does not believe in Brexit. And as for the so-called Eurosceptics, look, I learnt 25 years ago at the time of Maastricht, never ever trust the Tories. They will always put party before country. And I'm afraid they're doing it again. I'd love to see myself proved wrong, but I think it's very unlikely. Michael Gove now almost seems to be lauding the idea of a rules-based common market. It's beyond me. Martin on Facebook says Barnier is going to demand a single market. Well, Martin, we're offering Barnier effectively a single market on goods, but I suspect Barnier will want that to extend to services as well. Kwame says on Facebook, no one is taking back anything. You have been conned. I think a lot of people are feeling like that. And, you know, when I hear Conservative commentators saying that actually it's all okay because there's great unity around what the Prime Minister has done. Well, according to a poll of Conservative Party members that's out this morning, 60% of those are opposed to this deal. Tony says, if the EU reject May's treasonous plan, then surely no deal is back on the table. Maybe Boris and Gove are stitching her up. Tony, I'd just so love to think that was right. Actually, what the EU will do is demand yet more concessions, and then the argument you'll hear is, the one big problem with Theresa May's plan is that we will be a vassal state. We will be a rule taker, but not involved in the process at all. And people will start to argue, well, what's the point of leaving if we haven't got a say over the laws with which we've got to live? The other thing I think, Tony, that you'll see is Barnier can see that we're caving in again and again and again and again. All he needs to do is to kick that ball as far up the park as he possibly can, go off for his August holidays, and then we start to run out of time as we approach the October deadline. And that's when you'll hear, that is when you'll hear the argument in this country, and no doubt Lord Adonis will come in on one Sunday morning and see us and say it is vital in my national interest that we suspend Article 50, that we don't leave on March the 29th, but we suspend it for another 18 months. That is what I suspect. Now, Michael Gove, really, I suppose maybe I haven't been all that polite about his motives. Here's what he had to say about me this morning.
There are two people I noticed who've been very unhappy with this deal. Nick Clegg on the one hand, Nigel Farage on the other. Nick Clegg's unhappy with this deal because he doesn't want us to leave.
True.
Nigel Farage is unhappy with this approach because he wants this government to fail so that he can cry betrayal for his own reasons. All those of us who believe that we want to execute a proper Brexit and one that is the best deal for Britain have an opportunity now to get behind the Prime Minister in order to negotiate that deal.
Now, Michael, what do you mean, my own reasons? I have, ever since the Lancaster House speech that woman who's your leader gave, said, great, I want you to succeed. I want us to leave the European Union. I want us to take all the opportunities available to us. I want us to be a self-governing democratic nation where at general elections we vote on governments that will make laws on the environment, on employment policy, on everything. I want us to be in charge of that. What you've just done, Mr. Gove, is to agree to a deal where 45 years' worth of European law stays on our statute book and we accept effectively what is coming next. So, no, Mr. Gove, I don't want you to fail for my own reasons. I don't want to cry betrayal. I want to cry, fantastic, great success. We've got a huge future ahead of us. And I wonder why. I wonder why he chose to name me this morning. Well, I suppose it's because what they really fear, what they really are scared of, is if I was to go back into frontline domestic politics, their poll ratings, they think, would take a bit of a beating. And perhaps they would. Would they listen then? I'm not so sure. They haven't listened to 17.4 million people. Jesse is calling from Emsworth in Hampshire. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Nice to speak with you. Well, this is just, I'm livid, so I hope I can get this over to you.
Right.
I think we've been betrayed. I think it's like Hotel California. We can check out, but we can never leave. We're bullied. We're bullied like Ireland, like Greece. We've got no national pride whatsoever. I think the cross of St. George over Parliament should just take it down and take the red cross off and leave the white flag up.
I think that's a very good analogy, Jesse. I like that.
I think it's dreadful, but you tell me who I can vote for. I voted Conservative all my life. I switched for 2 years to UKIP to get this vote because I knew you would push them into a vote, which we all wanted. I then switched back to Conservative with all Mrs May's promises, but I just think this hate for anything that we stand up for it seems to be that we're wrong.
Has your trust, Jesse?
England's a dirty word.
Has your trust in the Prime Minister diminished?
Totally.
Totally.
And the Conservatives. So you tell me who we can vote for. Tell me that.
Well,
Labour's are no. Liberals are spent force. You come back, for God's sake, come back.
Well, Jesse, there's a few people saying that, and I have said that if this betrayal continues and we finish up suspending Article 50, then I will throw myself into full-time campaigning. I made that pledge last week, Jesse, and I absolutely mean it. I suspect, Jesse, that she, Mrs May, does not understand the electoral damage this breach of trust will do to the Conservative Party. I don't think Gove understands it. I don't think Boris understands it. I think this actually could hold them below the waterline. Jesse, thank you for your call. I tell you what, folks, there are millions of people like Jesse out there. Morning, Nigel. Here is classic. I've been a Conservative voter for 60 years, but never again. We have been let down and betrayed by Mrs May, who I trusted. I am disgusted, says Ron Mills from Walderslade in Kent. And Ron, I believe you. I believe you. That is how a huge number of Conservative voters are feeling. Oh, of course, they'll be told, no, you must vote for us, otherwise that nasty man Corbyn will get in, and they'll say, forget it. And millions will stay at home or vote for somebody else. That's my view. Milan is a first-time caller to this show, and he lives in Chiswick. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. I'm a Remainer, so hopefully we can still have a conversation. I still get my point across.
Always. Listen, I'm very happy to speak to Remainers or anybody. Of course I am. Actually, I'm actually this morning, Milan. I'd much rather have breakfast with a Remainer than I would with somebody who campaigned for leave and now accepts this sellout.
So, I don't have much time, so I'm going to make a point. So, we are still going to leave the EU in the absence of any calls in autumn. Now, if a Brexiteer wanted a hard border, restrictions on UK goods going abroad, or checks, or no passporting rights, or out of open skies, then fine. But in the absence of that, basically Brexiteers for the last 2 years have wanted to have their cake and eat it. And when the EU rejected that, instead of Brexiteers blaming themselves, they then come out with emotive words like, oh, the EU being bullied. They're not. They're just protecting their rules-based system. So either you're out completely, but you can't cherry pick. And that's where we are at the moment.
Well, Milan, we voted. I mean, those of us that believed in Brexit believed in an independent United Kingdom. That was our absolute number one priority. And yes, of course, there are technical details that need to be sorted out with all things in life. But what this Chequers deal gives us is we will not be properly independent, Milan. That's the problem we've got.
But what solution have Johnson, Gove, etc. come up with, Fox have come up with in the last 2 years? Nothing. The only solutions they've come up with are a technical solution to the Irish border, which doesn't exist anywhere in the face of mankind along the earth. So
It does. You look at that bridge over Detroit to Canada, and it goes on every day. There are agricultural products going back and forth over that bridge, and everybody that, if you're exporting stuff into America, you have to register what you're bringing in online half an hour before you do it, and there are no checks and no stops at all. I mean, there are ways round it. I mean, there really are ways round it. Milan, when you look at Boris Johnson and Michael Gove's position, your feeling is they're just being pragmatic, yeah?
No, I wonder what planet they're living on, to be honest. And I don't know, it seems that they're deciding which way the wind blows, and I go, oh, okay, we'll go that way.
Well, there isn't too much principle. Milan, we're out of time. I thank you. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 10:30. And Prime Minister May keeps up this pretence that we're taking back control of our laws, our borders and our money, and then sets out a proposal that she'll put to Brussels that actually do away with all of those things. I'm asking you this morning whether you trust her or not. And it's pretty clear to me that a very, very large percentage of those who voted leave do not trust her. Maybe she's hoping she's going to pick up votes from Liberal Democrats or from Labour of those who actually voted Remain. That would be a strange old strategy. Paul in Bedford says, you always go on, Nigel, about the 17.4 million people who voted leave. What about the 16 million people who voted Remain? We should have a say, and as one person once said, 4852 is unfinished business. But the point is we have voted to leave, and of those that voted Remain, a significant chunk of those have been saying now for some time, can the government please just get on with it? I have to say, I'm very, very pleased that Theresa is not in charge of our football team. They wouldn't know whether to attack or defend, because that is how I feel about all of this. Peter is calling from Wimbledon. Peter, good morning.
Good morning to you, Nigel. I think what Theresa has done is what's best for the country.
Okay.
And it's called damage limitations. And your fellow Brexiteers, they realise what's coming, and they don't want to put their name to the country being worse off, and that's why they've agreed to it. Deep down yourself, you know exactly what's coming, but you would never admit this to the British public because your con will be exposed.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm really struggling a little bit with this. So I back Leave because I think we should make our own laws, control our own borders, and recognise the fact that 85% of the world's economy is outside the eurozone. That's why I support Leave, and I believe we can be much better off as a country running our own affairs. What is dishonest or a con about that?
Well, the con is that you never mention the issues which really concern this country when in your referendum campaign. You only talk about some Syrian refugees entering Western Europe. You never talked about Northern Ireland peace agreement. You never talked about our service sector, which is the biggest contributor to the Treasury, losing EU trading passports. You never talked about people being able to frictionally trade.
Peter, it's an illusion.
With our biggest trading partner.
This is an illusion. The idea that the EU is good for our economy is an illusion. Something that big government and big business want you to believe. Come on, we've got 90% of our economy does not export to the EU, and yet Mrs May's agreement will continue to tie that 90% that have never traded with Europe with rules designed for European trade. Peter, look, let's not argue about the referendum because you and I have a different point of view on this. The question I'm asking, and you think Mrs May's done a good deal in the interest of the country, and I don't know whether you're a Conservative voter, Peter, or not, but will she be trusted? Because my point is, whatever the rights and wrongs of this, and we disagree, but my point is, she stood up in a general election and said, we're leaving the single market, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and now she's pretty much done the opposite.
Well, the reason she's done the opposite is maybe she's done the opposite, but it's the best interest of the country not to leave a single market and not to leave a customs union. And you know it yourself. And when you talk about the businesses which are pro-Remain, why do you talk about businesses you support from the United States who rely on us leaving the European Union so cheap goods from the United States can flood our market? Why do you talk about them? Why do you talk about people you colluded with? And Nigel, you're such a coward because you put... Sorry.
This is all very interesting, and perhaps you should come in one day and talk to me. Who did I collude with?
Well, what you have done is when you were put on the spot by the Guardian journalist Carol.
Sorry, Peter. Who?
You said.
This show is designed for people, not for journalists. It's designed for members of the public. Do you know, Peter? I've said again and again about this Sunday morning show. You can go wherever you want on radio or television and see a conversation going on where journalists talk about journalists. This show, LBC, as a station, is completely different. This is here for the public. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time, who did I collude with?
Well, I'm asking you a question.
Who did I collude with?
Russian ambassador? Why did you lie about meeting Russian ambassador? You said you never met him, but you did.
No, 5 years ago in the European Parliament. I meet ambassadors every single day. I've no idea who half of them are. I meet them every single day. I lead a group in the European Parliament, Peter. I met the guy about 5 years ago. Do you have a problem with that?
No, you're Russian ambassador to the United Kingdom. You, an elected member, not elected member of government or parliament in this country, you go and meet Russian ambassador.
So, Peter, I'm afraid you are not really keeping up with the pace here, are you? I'll say it very quickly one last time before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I lead a group in the European Parliament. The European Parliament swarms with ambassadors every single day that it's in session. In fact, the Turkish ambassador was very upset last week because I sort of gave him the slip. Peter, have a glass of something and calm down. Let's go to Matthew in Heathrow. Matthew, good morning.
Morning, Nigel. As you know, I'm a Remainer, accepted we're going to be leaving. But basically, I think we've got to give Theresa May a chance now because basically, I think what she set out is actually a template, what is going to be the deal for Northern Ireland, whatever happens, if we could get UK Parliament and Brussels to agree it. I think it's a good deal because it's going to take us time to leave and to get the structures in place. Eventually, we might end up the mainland UK on WTO rules once we've got deals ready for the rest of the world, but that's going to take time. So,
But Matthew, and by the way, I think there is an audience out there like you. There are people out there who were Remainers, but will think Mrs May's done the right thing. The previous caller kind of thought that before he got personal. But the point about this is, if we accept what she has put forward on Friday night after Chequers, and bear in mind, as I say, Mr Barnier will extract some more from that, that makes it pretty much impossible for us to do free trade deals with many other parts of the world. It binds us in to a system of regulation, which means we won't be able to do that.
yeah, I agree that is the initial case, but then there's going to be another general election, and then basically we could then start. We could start actually then looking at setting up a structure for the WTO, but we've got to start the steps slowly, and this is starting.
Do you think there's an argument? This argument that we need time. Do you think I'm right when I say there'll be an argument late this summer saying that Article 50 itself should be suspended for another 18 months?
Well, I mean, I think, as I say, this is going to be something for Northern Ireland if the UK Parliament doesn't agree it. And then we are going to have to suspend, because we're going to need a couple of years if we end up going for the WTO rules for the UK mainland.
Well, but already, Matthew, we've agreed to years and years of delays and concessions. Matthew, one quick question for you. Do you understand why a significant number of Leave voting Conservatives will feel betrayed by Mrs May this morning?
Well, I think the whole thing should be cross-party, and yeah, unfortunately, I was a Conservative voter. I didn't vote for Theresa May's hard Brexit, but because it's going to take time. So I think she's got to really now get Jeremy Corbyn on board, and if Jeremy Corbyn comes on board, then she'll be ready then to dump the DUP at the next election, what could actually happen before it's due.
Well, none of us know the answer to that, Matthew. But Matthew, you make a very, very valid point. Matthew thinks she's done a good deal, but Matthew is very much a Remain voter, but he accepts that Brexit needs to happen. Given a few weeks, some Tories will be offering a second referendum, says Simon on Twitter. I don't think they'll be doing that in a hurry. Unless, of course, she really wants to collapse Tory support. I tell you what, in my opinion, she's having a fairly good go at that anyway. As a long-time Tory voter, I cannot say I will never vote Tory again, because never is a long time. However, I will never vote for this current government again. Paul, I think there are lots of people like you. Carol from Horsham says, I'm apoplectic with rage. May was a useless Home Secretary, hear, hear, and now a useless Prime Minister, hear, hear. And I will never vote Conservative again. Please promise you will campaign for us. You are the leader we need. Well, Carol, very kind of you, but it's very difficult to see with our electoral system exactly what one can do. And maybe that does, above all, explain why Boris and Michael Gove are towing the line on something that they must know in their hearts is completely wrong and is not what they campaigned for during that referendum, because we are stuck through our electoral system with two-party politics, which is why it is so very, very difficult to change anything. We'll never vote Tory again. After Cameron, Osborne, now May and her government, traitors to democracy, says Caroline. People do feel very interesting, isn't it? Those that are saying Mrs May's doing OK are those that voted Remain. Those that were passionate leavers will not forgive her or her party for what is being proposed. Stephen says on Facebook, after voting Conservative all my life, I will never vote for them again. I don't think the Westminster bubble, the Conservative Westminster bubble, and the commentariat at their posh Notting Hill dinners have any idea the contempt, increasingly, that the public are feeling for them. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive at LBC. It is now 10:45. Do we trust Mrs May after that Chequers deal? I think it's a sellout. Others think it's a pragmatic, sensible way forward. Nigel, will you consider that the betrayal is not by the government trying to sort out this shambles? It was by you and your ilk when you sold Brexit as easy and fast. You should have made it clear it was going to be complex and slow. You were never going to do that, though, were you? Julie, if they'd asked me to, I'd have been more than happy to help. The trouble is, I would have finished up at Chequers having to walk down that drive and hail a taxi, because I wouldn't have sat through that. Absolutely no way. Julie, declaring independence is actually a very easy thing to do and a very quick thing to do. Now, I said from the start I was actually happy and I would accept, reluctantly, the 2-year period of Article 50. I accepted it with reluctance, but hoped that it wouldn't take as long as 2 years to sort out a basis on which we could do business in the future. But I'm afraid, Julie, what we've seen is it took 9 months to trigger it. We have a 2-year period, followed by a transition period that could go on for goodness knows how long, at least until 2021, it seems to me at the moment. And that, frankly, just isn't good enough from any angle. Let's get a first-time caller's view from Maidstone in Kent, the heart of Kent. Jeff, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. It's a privilege to talk talk to you.
Well, very good to hear from you. So what motivated you to pick up the phone this morning, Jeff?
Your first caller, actually.
Right, OK, go on.
What I don't understand with any of this, really, is I'm a Brexiteer. May goes into Junkers and Barney and people like this, and she can't stand up. She's this feeble woman. And yet, accordingly, at the cabinet meeting, obviously at Chequers, she threatens them immediately. When she did that, she threatened 17.4 million people. I mean, this is disgraceful. This is absolute treason.
Yeah.
I just can't. I mean, I would never, ever vote for Tories again, ever, as long as I live. I mean, UKIP's got to come back. Something's got to happen here. We can't allow this. This has got to stop. This has got to stop. I mean, I'm one of the mugs, unfortunately, that signed up for this lot back in 1973. And these youngsters today, they haven't got a clue what the EU is, what it's about. It's about Soros. It's about big money.
It's about authoritarianism, Jeff, too. It's about bullying the Polish government, bullying the Hungarian government. It's about total power.
Of course it is. And unfortunately, I'm one of the old Brits. I want to stand up and fight. I'm one of the old type. I'm not one of these new ones that wants to lay down and give in to all these namby-pamby white snowflakes. Good God. I mean, the Brexiteers that went into that cabinet meeting, do you know what they really are? They're Brexiteers in name only. That's what they are. They're absolute cowards. Haven't got a spine or backbone between the legs.
They're a waste of space, Jeff, aren't they?
Oh, a waste of space. They should be taken out and shot.
No. Whoa, slow down there. No, you were doing OK. You were on best behaviour there, Jeff, until then. But I do get the passion. Did you vote for Theresa in June last year?
Yeah, because I believed that we was going to get a Brexit. But
yes.
I've written to my MP. By the way, I email you, by the way. You've had an email today.
Okay.
I'm always emailing most of the MPs. I tell them exactly what I think of them, what they are. I mean, I even got an email back from Heidi Allen. Oh, did I get up her nose? Oh, Jesus, one of these Tory rebels. Unbelievable. What is wrong with these people? Instead of getting behind our country and giving us a good deal, they are literally selling us down the river.
Yeah.
We've been sold down the river, our fisheries, everything.
I know. Oh, the fisheries. Don't even talk about that. Jeff, you and I feel at one on this. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Tell me, are England going to win the World Cup, Jeff?
Well, let's hope we get Belgium. I'd love to see, what's his Johnston? I'd love to see his...
Verhofstadt and all the rest of it.
Take your pick. Who cares?
Jeff, thank you for your call. Well, hey, you know, he'd never picked up the phone to LBC before, but he felt motivated to do so this morning. There is a lot of passion out there. Nigel, have you noticed that the majority of Remainers are understanding and sympathetic of this so-called deal? That should tell you all you need to know about how much rubbish it is, says James on the Isle of Dogs. What I thought was extraordinary was Lord Malloch Brown, you know, who is one of the absolute head honchos of the Remain campaign, of campaigning to get us a second referendum, funded directly by George Soros. And Lord Malloch Brown, after stints working at the Foreign Office, indeed has been on some boards of George Soros's companies. And Lord Malloch Brown, on Friday morning, urging the government to back Theresa May's deal. So one of the high priests of Remain, of the European project, of globalism, thought it was a good deal. That tells me as much, frankly, as I need to know. James says on Facebook, don't forget, the EU could tell us what to do and we have to say yes. Well, James, she tells us there'll be a parliamentary lock and that we'll be able, potentially, to block European legislation. But they've been lying to us about that sort of thing. Don't you remember the double lock that Cameron and Osborne introduced? None of it's worth a row of beans. If you're staying part of a single market for goods, a customs union for goods, which is what this deal says, the ultimate jurisdiction is the European Court of Justice and European law. And the rest of it is put up as a pretense, a con. Basically, they're just lying to you. Raymond is calling from Battersea. Good morning, Raymond.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Nigel, I think you're being very unfair.
OK.
You know very well what difficulties Theresa May and the government have had. And frankly, it should have been an all-party thing from the very beginning, because she's got all parties attacking her. She's got the EU attacking her. There was no middle road other than the one that she believes she's now agreed. I mean, Brexiteers didn't want to have a soft Brexit. Rather, they wanted a hard Brexit. The non-Brexiteers wanted a soft one. there was an impossible task, quite honestly, and you had to find a way to get in between. And I believe that's what she's done. It certainly is not the best as far as freeing us totally, but I think we're 90% free, and I hope perhaps later on we will become more free. In the meantime, I think you've been unfair because not only that, you just put on a recording of two ministers who accused you of all sorts of things. You didn't put on any recording for them, or you didn't have anybody in the studio to act on their behalf. So I think I understand why you do it. I understand your point of view, but I think there is no fairness, and the LBC really should control it a little bit better.
Well, Michael Gove is more than welcome to say whatever he likes about me. Of course he is, and I just responded to that. But Raymond, you talk about all party, but I'm afraid we're so far away from the concept now of all parties working together that this deal was all about keeping party unity of one party. That's what it was about. I would accept your point that Mrs May finds herself in difficult circumstances, but I'm afraid if we call this deal a compromise, she's compromised way too much the other way. We've gone, Raymond, in the space of a year, from Brexit means Brexit to Brexit means staying as close as possible to the European Union.
No, I think it means as close as we have to for all intents and purposes. We have to do certain things to keep the country in balance. And again, she was fighting with business leaders. She was fighting with union leaders. Everybody wants something different. And I don't believe even if you were in power, you could have done any different other than a total hard Brexit.
Well, why is she being so But why, Raymond, is she being so dishonest? Why stand up and say we'll be leaving the common fisheries policy, we'll be getting back control of our waters, and then put out a government document last week that says that now we're leaving the European Union, there could be better fishing opportunities. She's arguing we could now get a better deal from Brussels in sharing out fish. Time and again, Raymond, she says one thing, she portrays something, and then does the opposite. That's the bit that really gets me. That's why I can't trust her.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, but I still think the points I make are valid, and it is an impossible situation.
OK, now, Raymond, I've allowed you to make those points. You've made them very clearly, and there is residual support in some ways for her. Many people think, gosh, given how embattled she's been rather brave. Raymond, I thank you. The problem is, those people that really believe in Brexit, that would have crawled over broken glass to get to the polls to vote for Brexit, a lot of them are Conservatives. The Conservative Party has become, in its grassroots, in its membership, in its councillors, it's become a very Eurosceptic party. I'd like to think I helped that process, and they just are not going to accept this. Peter is a first-time caller from Wallington. Good morning, Peter.
Oh, good morning, Nigel. I'd just like to say, I cannot believe that we've been lied to yet again by Mrs May. She clearly does not understand that the reason why like 17.4 million people, voted for Brexit, for us to leave the controlling influences of a foreign political organisation. Why do we need to be governed by somebody else? You know, we don't.
Well, I've always thought that, I must say.
You know, my grandfather, he lost his brother during the First World War fighting against the Germans. You know, pure coincidence that they're now in charge of Europe, but there you go.
Well, they've been weakened a bit lately, Peter. Mrs Merkel is not quite as dominant as she was. But
Can you tell me why do they insist on telling us that, we need a deal to do trade? We don't. Does America have a deal with the United States of Europe? No. We do not need a deal. No, nobody needs a deal.
As we speak, there are tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of containers on their way across the oceans, coming to Felixstowe, coming to Southampton, going into Rotterdam. There's no trade deal there.
No. I mean, we simply have to say to our government at the present time, if you do not do as you were instructed to do, you know, by 17.4 million people, you will never, ever be voted in again.
Peter, on that note, I will end this debate. And Peter, another first-time caller, Mrs May, you're in much bigger trouble than you ever thought you were. Now, The World Cup quarter-final victory yesterday sparked wild scenes across the country, fans taking to the streets in vast numbers. We've seen traffic blocked, people climbing onto tops of buses, jumping onto bus shelters, all sorts of craziness. Fans even invading an IKEA store, Swedish IKEA store, and frankly behaving like a bunch of yobbos. So, is the rise of English nationalism due to England's progress in the World Cup a good thing or a bad thing? I'm wearing, by the way, St George cufflinks. If you think it invites the wrong crowd, call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think it's bringing us all together, in which case text to 84850. And maybe you think this is great, come on England, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC.